Okay, I will call this committee of the whole to order at 5 o'clock sharp. The town of Smithers acknowledges the Getting clan and Wet'suwet'en people on whose unceded traditional territory we live, work, and play. The public is notified that the meeting is being recorded and webcast globally, a notice of which has been placed on the bulletin board outside the council chambers. There are no late items. Council, can I have a motion for approval? Councillor Elliott, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously. And first off, we have somebody, Julian from Intervistas Consulting on screen. Take it away, Julian.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me today. Just going to share my screen. I believe Jill and Trevin should be either on the line or also nearby.
They are, yes.
Perfect. Right, happy to start. Well, thanks everybody for joining me tonight. Going to go through with you a piece of work that was commissioned to Intervistas by Smithers to look at two parts, market assessment and leakage study. But before I do so, just a brief introduction as to Intervistas Consulting as itself. We're a 60-person plus transportation consulting firm based in British Columbia with many people scattered throughout Canada to help based on project activity, and also some strong US and UK presence. We range on a variety of topics, but we've centered ourselves in 4 areas. One, aviation commercial development and policy. Then we also have airport planning, strategic services, and then economic and regulatory affairs. Some of the work that we're going to present tonight fall mainly into the aviation commercial development, but also we've done previous work in the economic side of things as well. Just a little bit myself, geography grad, started Waterloo, then quickly moved into aviation with finally a master's degree in airport planning and management from Loughborough University in the UK, as I spent all my career here in the aviation world. Like many people in Canada, started at Air Canada and then moved their way through that, did some time at CATA, but more so spent the last 12 years or so with the GTA, overseeing their growth strategy for air service development and aspects of air aviation business development that included route demand, some of the aspects we're going to discuss today, and then incentive programs and strategies moving forward. And then been with Intervistas for now 2 years. So thank you for having me. That's a little bit about me. We'll get right into the topic at hand. So since 2020, as you can imagine, there's been quite a lot of change in regional connectivity within Canada and also on the planet. We've seen some definitely emerging trends and some changes with some of our carriers here in Canada. One of the most noticeable changes has been on aircraft size. Prior to 2020, we had many of our Air Canada and WestJet having a smaller fleet of aircrafts for size, but due to the circumstances of 2020, coming out of that really allowed them to start to prioritize and look at their hub connectivity in a different way, really focusing quite a bit on international expansion, looking at fortifying the hubs, as well as also refleeting themselves. So what we have here is, on the right-hand side, is just some recent articles around that per se, as far as what has happened in the industry of recent. And what we have is, we have Air Canada on the top, fortifying some of their Toronto areas, as well as pulling out of some smaller destinations such as North Bay. And then we have Porter introducing themselves here in the domestic landscape. Moving on, we can see that British Columbia and Alberta airports recovery since that time of period have also been recovering not as strong as other airports. And here we have Smithers highlighted in right at the very end that sees that we have about 56% recovery since 2019. If we look at the gauge, so we talked about that aircraft, and a reason for this a lot is based on the fleet of aircrafts available to us. And what we have here, as you can see, the seats per movement has increased quite a bit. We know that as term, as gauge in the industry, as well as you can see that's very much seeing that through the smaller airports inside of BC and Alberta. The project itself reflected on two parts, as I mentioned. One, the market assessment, and then the catchment analysis. The market assessment really looked at a comprehensive look at schedule and passenger demand over the periods. And we look at some comparison of fares, a good indication of how things are going, and then really starts to identify some key markets. That's not just good on itself, that's great to understand, but there's really value in what we know as a catchment analysis. And we'll get into the details of that after, but really starts to look at more the behaviors of a passenger and the behaviors of people in a certain area. We then decide whether or not those people are residents or visitors, and then we can then use some very great technology that we have available to us now to track those individuals and then determine some of their behaviors and their patterns. And we'll share some of those results with you. Those two together really formulate what we can say is a very defined understanding of what's happening in your area. And then we can then use that to apply that moving forward for growth strategies, for air service development strategies, or other insights that we might be able to leverage that for the airport and the community. First, the competition for Smithers. So it's very important as we look at market assessments and the catchment study, we need to identify some of the alternate airports in the neighborhood. So what we have is Terrace, Prince George, Prince Rupert, and Vancouver. And even though Vancouver is quite substantial of a drive, a 13.5-hour drive away, there are some tendencies and some behaviors that will show through the study that people are still using Vancouver even so far away. Very small percentage of people, but nonetheless something to be thought of when we think about our overall competitive airports in the area. On the left-hand side, just some metrics that we start to introduce when we think about market assessment. We talk about average weekly flights, we talk about average weekly seats, and then we look at a recovery rate from 2019. On a side note, 2025 was probably the last year we'll start to revert back to a 2019 comparison. There's enough years now of trend, and we know that some of the behaviors of the airlines and travel patterns of passengers have been well established now since then. So we are less and less referring back to 2019. But for the case of this study that was started last year, we will still refer to it from time to time throughout the study. So the first task, market assessment. So three areas that we reviewed. We reviewed the capacity, we reviewed the demand, and then together we look at the entire market. From that, we'll be able to pull out pieces of information, really some good insights as to what the historical seat capacity of what appetite and what possibilities were there at 2019. Then we start to think about some of the demand levels, and then so with the airlines and how people are behaving to that, really gives us a good picture of the market review to start off. So quite quickly, this is nothing that surprises probably many of you. On the top here, you have the current schedule of Smithers at the time that this was pulled as of August of 2025 when the study was completed in this part. And at the bottom, what you have is a 4-year review. And the biggest thing that you see here is that the missing of some of these destinations here at the bottom. And that's really contributed to Central Mountain Air removing themselves from Smithers in 2024 completely. This here is a annualized view of it, and you can see that Air Canada, as far as frequencies or movements, is fairly close, not 100%, but fairly close to their levels. As far as that, what we're missing is really the Central Mountain Air component. again, about the small aircraft servicing smaller communities, some of those challenges they have with labor and also parts for smaller aircrafts. On a capacity, or what as seats, so another term, capacity is referred to as for seats on an aircraft. What we have here is Air Canada having a 50,000 level and then coming in at 42 in 2025. So again, really feeling that 8,500 seats from Central Mountain Air that's no longer available to us at Smithers. Some other information that we pulled out of the report, and when we do the assessment, we start to introduce a term called PDUs, which is passenger daily each way. So this is the passenger demand, and what we have is the PDU number on top. And what we're really showing is level of travelers, and this isn't for each day, it's an average for each day. So what it means is gives us a good metric to gauge as to what kind of aircraft schedule or what kind of airline schedule might be able to offer the people of Smithers. Another important part is on seasonality. As you can imagine, different months of the year play different behaviors for passengers, tourists, or for trade. And what we have here is a look over the same period and seeing really the seasonality. The seasonality hasn't changed too much, I'll say. Very typical of high tourist or Canadian landscape. But what we have here is quite a large charter activity. So that's something that we captured with the airport directly in a different analysis and different gathering of data, but really showing here what the difference is for charter activity. And that's an opportunity to convert charter into commercial. So again, adding into the conversation about, what people are doing, how are they getting there, what are their behaviors, so we can better understand that to look forward at growth. Another metric we use is average fares. So what we have here is directional fares, one-way fares in US dollars outside of taxes or any kind of tariffs that are charged by the airport, charges and fees. So what we have is some very good news. So when we see prices going up, we know that over the years, fares have increased generally. Domestic fares have been quite high, but nonetheless, Smithers is a part of that, and that's a good indication that fares are being offered to passengers. There's an appetite for people to buy into it and people to use it. So what that means, in short, is that there's money to be made for some of the carriers. Now, the real kind of question everybody wants to know is, well, where are people going outside of the direct flight to Vancouver? Because not everyone's just traveling to Vancouver. And here, what we have, as I mentioned, we introduced the PDU number. It's going to come back a few times in the analysis. What we have here is the demand, the origin and destined demand, and the top markets that you see out of Smithers. Vancouver continues to be very high, which is great, but that's also part of what we have is other flights feeding into that Vancouver flight. We have Victoria, Nanaimo, very much part of that Vancouver flight. And as we go down, we start to see some destinations that might be of more interest to you to have a direct service, per se, out of Smithers. The first one that comes up is Calgary, and the second one may be Toronto with direct flights. We're going to put a pin in Calgary because we're going to come back to Calgary in a few slides and elaborate a little bit about the demand that we've noticed and some of the insights that we've learned and gained from this analysis into the demand for Calgary. So that's one part of the market assessment. What we've now moved into is the catchment analysis. So as I mentioned before, we have two parts, and the second part being the catchment analysis. And what it does, we start to look at the geography of the area. We start to define what is naturally your catchment area. From that, we're able to assess the passenger's behavior in that area, and we define them as inbound, outbound, or we also have residents and visitors. So we start to identify the types of passengers that we notice and the behaviors that's going on in this catchment area over a 13-month time. So the data we're using is from a company called Azira. It's a cell phone data provider of information. So your cell phones and the apps you're running on them, they collect some of those informations all within the privacy laws of Canada, all anonymous and not traceable to the actual individual. But nonetheless, very strong data for us to use when we start to compile it and we start to use that data to see behaviors and trends as to the movements of those cell phone pings. So we collect all that data, and then from the service provider, we then take it and we start to work with it over the project to really redefine and define some of the behaviors that we're noticing. And what you have here is we started with the white area. So when we first identified the white area, we really needed to kind of go as big and broad as we could to see if there was any kind of real changes in behaviors as such. From there, we figured that it was a little too wide, so we cast the net a little too wide, and we thought we could get some better results if we narrowed the catchment area to something a little bit more natural to Smithers. So that's where you see the blue area. That's part of the iteration work that we do when using Azira's data. Works in iteration, we have to refine it a few times to get to something a little bit more manageable. We started with 198 billion data sets, and we ended up with 1.1 sample rate, far within the statistical confidence levels that we needed to move forward with the analysis. So the results. Some of the results that you're seeing here on the left-hand side, what we now introduce is the word capture rate. So how much of the demand, or how much of, no, pardon me, how much of the passengers that we've noticed at each of the in our natural catchment, how much are we actually using at Smithers Airport versus Terrace, Prince George, as I mentioned before, Vancouver, and then also Prince Rupert. So you can see that almost half, about 46% of all travelers are here using the Smithers Airport. There is still, that means 50% is not. And we have Terrace and Prince George, the two largest airports in the area that are attracting users and passengers. What we have on the right-hand side is then we start to divide them into residents and visitors. And because we've been watching them very loosely, but identifying them through the data sets over the last 12 months, then we can label them as a residence or common evening location. And then anyone outside of their common evening location of our catchment area, we've now decided that they are a visitor. So that gives us an inside view as to what types of people are using the airport. So not just passengers, but do they live here, or actually are they visiting the community? And what you have is a very strong gravity for Smithers of about 53% that are using the airport. Now, others are using it to Terrace and Prince George, as we would expect from the first piece of information that we learned from the left. But then on the right-hand side, we have the visitors. So lots of different insights that we can gain from 41% of the visitors using Smithers, but also 36% of Terrace. There's a lot of reasons we can, well, a few strong reasons, people doing multiple trips, different schedules, different types of offering, different price points as to why Terrace and Prince George are attracting that many people that are traveling throughout Smithers. At the bottom, some evidence or some just insights to share with you. Again, this has all been made available, so but you can see that Vancouver still shows up. So even with such a large drive, there is still a draw of passengers using Vancouver Airport. And again, primarily price or schedule offerings are the two biggest ones as to what's maybe driving those behaviors to Vancouver. And what we have also then is a very strong balance between the residents and visitors. So that 53-41% as well. Moving on to the next slide, what we have is a graphical representation of also the data points that we had. And sharing with you this is the point here is to show on the left-hand side, we would hope to see some sort of residents concentrated together. And what you have here is you can see by these blue dots. Blue dots are not indicative of size to population or size to data points that we used. It's really just to show where the concentration of them are. And what you have here on the right-hand side is now you can start to see some linear activity. And this linear activity is strongly suggesting some of the more tourist-drawn destinations and some of the other neighboring communities of such. So again, another insight you can use this for is, where are the visitors traveling to? Where is their concentration? What kind of where are they going around Smithers? How close are they staying in between to other competitors? So we start to use some of those insights to draw out conclusions. An interesting part that we've started to include in these analysis is a month over month or of 2 different years. Because the data can be quite large to manage, as I shared with you, really need to kind of drill it down and narrow it to a little bit more. But what we can see here, though, and this is the only point of reference that we have for a year-over-year comparison, is that now we have the same capture rates, we have the same residents, and we same visitors, same airports, alternative airports that we have in our study. But then we really show the difference between the 2 months, the September of 2024 and the September of 2025. And what we're seeing here, that on an overall, what we have is Smithers is losing some of its overall capture rate. So the information being the same data taken at the same time, and nothing's changed with collecting the data points, would indicate that we're having some sort of leakage happening from Smithers, that we're not retaining as much as we were in the past. And then we can see the airports that we had in our study, and you can clearly see that Terrace is picking up a good chunk of that overall capture rate from 17 to 26. And then the others are dropping, but Terrace would seem to be the airport of choice for people of Smithers using the first alternative. When we get to residents and we get to visitors, what's nice about this is the residents are still choosing to use Smithers airports. So we're not seeing too much of that. However, there has been a shift with the alternative airports. So Prince George, less so, and more Terrace. So Terrace is really gaining traction in this area for residents. But as far as residents that you had in 2024, you're still holding on to that same value. However, on the visitor side, in order to balance that loss in the overall, that's where we're seeing the decline in capture rates. So in the visitor side of things, we also see now a decrease from Smithers on the visitor side, and surprise, surprise, we see Terrace now increasing in that catchment activity and that natural leakage that's happening. So again, lots of insights we can draw from this. Vancouver comes up as a 0 on the visitor side of things. On the resident side of things, you see a little bit stronger year over year. When we get down to the smaller digits, it needs to be a little bit looked at a little bit harder. But what we have here is Vancouver on the resident side, people choosing to use Vancouver more so than they did in September of 24. And then, so just to take that step, just one more, to take that concept of month over month, one more step out, we start to see as to why maybe that has been the case in Terrace. And what I can say is that their schedule hasn't changed too much. So their scheduling offers haven't changed too much over the 2 periods. And that's the first kind of test we would have done to say, okay, well, why is Terrace having that stronger gravity? So we need to get into this a little bit more, and we've been discussing that as to why that might happen, but we'll need to do a little bit more research and thought around that as to why that might be happening. But that's a good sign, because that means then there's not been a new flight or a new strategy perhaps introduced there. So it might be about pricing, convenience, time, such. So it's not a new service, but there is draw that we're seeing, substantial draw to Terrace. So if I say the big so what, so then I say, remember we put a pin in Calgary. What I'd like to do now is come back, and if I can quickly just go back to that slide, and I want to show you that Calgary, if you remember, was down here. It wasn't maybe necessarily what we would look at from the OD demand and say the next market should be either Victoria or Nanaimo, or even Kelowna or Edmonton, we look at it and say Calgary. So let's go back to the catchment area analysis. So what the catchment analysis area showed us then is by applying the rates of the passengers that are leaking and their schedules and what they have to offer, we can draw some strong lines of conclusion to say that our own passengers going to Calgary is about 3.6 PDUs a day. Remember that term PDUs, passenger daily each way. We believe we're leaking about 17 passengers a day to the airports that we observed in our catchment to Calgary. So that's quite substantial, especially when we look at it from the size and the offerings of Terrace. So that Terrace comes out as about, we believe, about 10 passengers. We can say that 10 passengers are being leaked from Smithers to Terrace going to Calgary. And then we follow that same kind of line of thought through the next 3 destinations. So we say 6.3 from Prince George and 0.1 from Prince Rupert. And there's a big reason why this is happening. And 0.5 is quite far to go to Vancouver. But it's the direct service out of the two that is driving that. So when we put that all together, what we have is a total demand of 20 PDUs per day. And when you apply that same logic against all the destinations that we identified before, Calgary now actually becomes the number 2 destination that is sought after from your catchment area of Smithers. And now one would say, well, maybe 20 a day is not big enough. But what we say is then we start to add in the destinations that would have a logical connection opportunity through Calgary. So then we say Edmonton, and then we say Toronto, we say Winnipeg, we say Montreal, Ottawa, the big centers like that. When we start to add those up, Calgary now can act as a very logical hub for you to connect to the east of Canada. So what we have, or central or eastern Canada, never mind some of the international opportunities that into a hub like Toronto or Calgary or Vancouver has for you, adding a WestJet strategy of international and getting into some sort of WestJet airline perhaps into Smithers, really adding to your value and the value proposition that the Smithers will have. I'm gonna pass this. So few points of conclusion as we get to the 30-minute mark here, it looks like. So some good news on the demand for air service, stable market, 4% decline, but still very stable compared to much other communities in Canada. As far as the Vancouver is the largest market, but again, that's a hub mindset, really connecting to the hub and driving that, even though there is a strong OD component. The local competition, we see Terrace and Prince George as the strongest overall, really about that 50% losing travelers and that core catchment that you're retaining, but also the 50% that is being leaked to other areas. And what you also have then is, the opportunity for new service, as I went through that last logic slide with you, really indicating that Calgary is very much a strong destination opportunity for Smithers, especially with the leaked community or the leaked passengers going to other communities. And at that point, that completes the review or the summary of the 2 pieces of analysis we've done. I'll stop sharing my screen now. Happy to take any kind of questions the group might have.
Council, any questions? Councillor Batterson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ray, and thank you, Jillian, for the presentation. Not necessarily a question, but just say that I'm really interested in learning what the main drivers for the passenger leakage is. You said you're going to dive into that more. And then just maybe some recommendations on what markets offer the strongest opportunity for recapture. And then maybe based on maybe other comparable regional airports, which actions have proven to be the most effective in reducing those leakages. I'll just confess I'm one of those people that often compares prices and flight availability from Terrace out of WestJet. And there's a number of reasons why I do that. One is the odd time my family can actually afford to go on a vacation, it's price. WestJet has really great offers that they sort of package together that, of course, you have to overnight, typically anywhere in either Vancouver or Calgary. And the price difference is quite significant, along with something that unfortunately we cannot control, which is weather and our ability to navigate in the valley. I just find many times that I get stuck up in the air. We're able to land in Terrace versus Smithers. And lastly, again, something that I don't think we can control is just, I find the customer service with WestJet is just incredibly higher when it comes to Air Canada as far as delays, cancellations, etc.
Yeah, I think like you touched a bit about that, like why passengers are leaking to one airport or choosing one airport or another. So, the price and schedule are usually the key drivers in that, as you mentioned. Level of service as well plays into that too. And that is all passenger dependent. That's all personal preference for sure. We also have operational reliability and schedule completion. So even though you mentioned weather, which is fine at Smithers, but airline networks are quite complex and they depend a lot on a larger system. So your operational reliability or your performance could be less, even though your weather conditions are fine. It's because somewhere else in the country where that flight has originated from has caused that delay. So you could be improperly paired with another flight, or you could be there's some scheduling challenges that might happen. So those are usually some of the bigger reasons why passengers choose, airport A versus airport B. You asked about how you might be able to change that or retain services, say from other destinations. There's various programs or mindsets out there. There are different types of incentive programs or rebate programs that are offered. There are minimum revenue guarantees that are available or that are common in this space. There are shared partnerships. There's quite a few different ways to work with partners and airline partners on attracting new air service. And more commonly now, they're usually coupled with levels of a service or some sort of service standards. So it's not just a incentive program on the airline's part. There is an obligation or a burden sometimes of airlines to perform at X level in order to qualify for said rebate program. So it depends on situation, depends on demand, depends on the carrier, to be quite honest. So I hope that answers some of your questions about the driving forces and some of the programs you might be able to offer. And then in the destination, sorry, just the last one you had about the top destinations. It's in those slides, one of the slides there that I showed. We have those origin and destin passengers, those lists. That's currently what's behaving inside of the Smithers at the Smithers Airport. It's about how you leverage, and then Calgary, like I mentioned, once we do the two studies, we put it together. Calgary, instead of being number 7, actually becomes number 2. And how do you leverage a Calgary hub to satisfy the other 18 destinations that are coming up on your preferred list?
Hey, thank you for that, Mayor Attrell.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ray. Thanks, Julian, for the presentation. Super interesting. I have one question. I might have just missed something, and it was on, it's the slide YYD Annual Passenger Demand Overview. And it was the piece where you were saying the 84, so it's the last column on the slide, 84 per day. And I just wanted to make sure I understood it properly. So those numbers are the average number of people that fly per day. So that 84 in year 2025 is on average 84 people wanted to fly per day or did fly per day?
No, did. Those are all real numbers. Yeah, and you're right. The number is 84. And those are the passengers daily each way. And that was year ending. Here, I can share it again just for you, Madam Mayor. Bear with me. Share.
Yeah.
Here, this one.
Correct. Oh, no. Yeah, that one. Right.
Yeah. So what we did is we took the full calendar year And then what we did is we took, because we didn't have the full calendar year for the 2025 data set, we just took year ending August 24 to year ending August 25. So you have year ending August 25, 84, and where you have the different colors or the different sectors that we call, so domestic, transborder, and international.
Okay, thank you. And then the one other thing is really just anecdotal, but it's on the Smithers core caption. It looks like this one. You kept all those colors, your slides. And it's interesting, you know, when we're looking at September 2024, September 2025, you know, part of it is trend. I can see that from all the work that you've done and presented. And then anecdotally, I just happen to remember that 2024 was actually a really good fishing season and 2025 was not. And so that probably is blended in there somewhere, just those circumstances of things that attract people on the visitor side. Of course, there's many other reasons why people are flying or not flying, but it just, that really stuck out for me because I remember both of those months. So I guess there's probably no end to the drill down that we could do to figure out what people are doing. But I think overall, you know, what I'm seeing in the trends, of course, I don't like, but I really appreciate the way that you've led us through this. It's understandable, and I'm looking forward to the now what part.
Yeah, and I think, Madam Mayor, if I can, like, knowing, you know, they say knowing is half the battle, right? So, like, you know, now with a certain level of confidence as to what passengers and what residents and what visitors are doing in your natural catchment, the ones that you own, as far as I'm concerned. Those are the ones that should be using your airport and should be very happy with the level of service and the schedules offered. And as we get into more of the details with the airlines and what they're offering, but now you know, so you have some sort of natural gravity that you can put a pin in or put your finger on, and you can use that to leverage now the conversations with carriers. And we can start to have discussions with carriers, and these are long sales cycles. They are not, right, they take time to mature even the markets and to have those discussions with them at the right timing. But these are the right steps, I would say, for you to take as a group to move forward with having some very good and very confident discussions with the carriers.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I have a couple. I know it's hard to find comparables, but how does our leakage rate compare to similar sized airports around Canada?
Yeah, it's a perfectly good question to ask. Yeah, we didn't include it in the study, so the study won't be able to show that. But what I can say from previous studies we've done, it's probably not an answer you want to hear. It varies. So if you are, I will say, like in the Southern Ontario region where you have Hamilton, Kitchener, Waterloo, Toronto, Pearson, Toronto Island, with such a large population base with options, you know, an hour apart from each other, the leakage is going to be quite high, right, in some areas, right? So even though you have a very favorable airport with favorable service, you could still see a large leakage and a small retention number. But generally speaking, with airports of this side, we would hope to see at least 50% of your local catchment using your facilities. So that I would argue that's a strong point to have, and especially the month over month from the September to September comparison that we did. You know, you're showing that your residents are still staying strong to the airport. They like the airport. They like using the airport. They want to use it. Now we just have to use the information we have to you know, apply that to some sort of growth strategy or what's next kind of idea. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's interesting to know that, you know, I was very surprised at how many people are going to Prince George, actually. I thought we were losing most of it to Terrace. So that's interesting to know. And it probably mostly has to do with offerings out. It's a bigger airport. So I think the other question I have, and trying to tread lightly around how I ask this, is how do we put say we wanted to put a Calgary in and we convinced a small airline to do it. How do we prevent larger airlines from maybe dropping their prices for a while so it's not economical for the smaller airline to do so?
Yeah. Yep. Pushing one airline or one competitor out of the market by dropping fares. It's only sustainable for so long, I think. So there are ways you can manage that a bit tighter. You never know what the airline strategy is as far as having a market dominance or a market share in an airport. But there are ways, and you don't want to compete against your current carrier either. You wouldn't want to do anything that destroys their market share, right? They've been there for years. They're servicing your community. You want to complement it. You wouldn't want to introduce something that would create a direct competition off the bat. If you had a large demand that was unserviced, I would maybe argue yes. But in smaller markets and regional airports in Canada, it's much better to complement the service versus compete. So to your point, I wouldn't want to put yourself into a position where an airline would drop the prices, because to me that would be a direct competition in order to find something that would complement them.
Thanks. I appreciate that answer. If council doesn't have any more questions, we will be discussing this a little later amongst ourselves and staff. Thanks a lot, Julian, for your presentation. It was actually better to hear it in the explanations than just reading the slide deck. So thanks a lot for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Okay, so we're just going to take a little pause while we get ready for the next delegation. our cold weather response plan. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Madam Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be here with you in person today. We generally do these virtually, so it's always a plus to actually have that in-person engagement. So very appreciative of you having me here this evening and looking forward to discussing the cold weather response plan that Callian has drafted for the town. Next slide, please. Perfect. Okay, just a couple of agenda items that we'll go through. We'll do a quick introduction, go through what the project methodology and the main objectives were, and then discuss some of the finer details that are associated with the cold weather response plan in its current draft form, and as well close out with some next steps in terms of how the project will close out, but also some additional steps as you start working towards next winter. Obviously, we're currently in winter months, but this is all about where we can continue to build momentum and build our toolbox in terms of meeting the needs of our community. Next slide, please. So who we are, we're Callian. We are a global company that is headquartered here in Canada. Office is in Ottawa, but we are diverse. We are in the United States, we're in Belgium, and we are clear across Canada. My partner, unfortunately, wasn't unable to join me today. She's dealing with a flight delay out of Vancouver, but I'm out of Lethbridge, Alberta, and she is coming in from Edmonton. Very diverse communities, but it allows us to really connect with different communities across the country. We have multiple sectors. We assist with healthcare, learning, emergency management, which is where I'm part of today, nuclear, space, defense, and IT and cyber solutions. We've been doing this for about 40 years, and we are a publicly traded company, again, with about 4,000 different employees globally at this point, but really focused on the emergency management side of things. We are very much rooted in this for the last 20 years. Our emphasis is going out and empowering communities. Our team is a collective of emergency management professionals that have worked at the local level, the provincial level, and by way of our work with the company, we have had exposure to the federal side of things as well. We look to complement and really augment what you have in place, but make sure that those solutions are resilient, bound in resiliency, and make sure that your community focus is on life safety and always building forward that momentum. A little bit about myself. I have a master's in emergency management from Jacksonville State University. I'm also a certified emergency manager under the International Association of Emergency Managers. And for 5 years prior to my 2 years with Callian, I was actually the emergency manager for City of Lethbridge, which has very similar challenges in their community related to homelessness and extreme weather events. And we'll go through in more detail in terms of what that looks like and what we've been able to put together for what meets the needs of Smithers, just because every community is dynamic, even though there's a shared countrywide challenge at this point. Next slide. Going through our project objectives and methodology. Our plan when we came in and we were brought in by the town was to make sure that we develop a legislatively compliant cold weather response plan, again, to augment what is currently in place with the main emergency management plan for the town, but also emphasize the coordination at not only the regional level with the district, but also your internal community partners. Who do you have available to you in your downtown and other neighboring communities, and how can we collaborate and make sure that those go better? Focusing on what we are doing, again, this plan is very much rooted in the operational realities of where you currently exist. We're able to do deep dives in terms of our discovery and learning what your program is built around, but also the resources. It's one thing for us to come out and propose multiple solutions by way of a cold weather response plan, but if we don't have the resources to match the objectives, it's no more than a wish. So it needs to be realistic in nature. And if we can continue to compound resources in to assist that approach, it's certainly part of the next step angle, but very much a beneficial part of the planning pieces that we've put together in terms of that collaboration angle. Speaking to collaboration, of course, we have the who is involved side of things, very much rooted within our proprietary contractor with the Town of Smithers Fire Department by way of the town, but also engaging those community partners, whether it be your internal emergency support services and other community partners, namely the temporary winter shelter operator at this point. And by way of that, it's also BC Housing and, of course, the Ministry of Emergency Management Climate Readiness. This is a fulsome project where we make sure that the entire community spectrum comes together just to make sure that all those operational realities that we do discover and put strategies forward to actually make sense. Are they the right people at the right place at the right time? Which is very much what your EOC is going to be worried about whenever they're activated. It's been a very fulfilling project in terms of just that engagement level. You can tell that the community is very cognizant of this issue and they want to find a solution, and it makes our lives easier in terms of when we go and actually speak to these groups and find out what's your role, what are your major challenges, and how can we help fix that? So that's really the heart of this project. Next slide. Our methodology, I've mentioned it throughout, is that discovery piece, our literature review. It's reviewing what's already in place. What do you already do well? When we continue to add emergency management plans to an overarching plan or even emergency management bylaw, it's all about augmenting what already works. Your emergency management plan is going to have its own annual review process or similar, where those revisions will be made and updates will be made. The goal of this plan is where it will fit in as a functional appendix, where it can be pulled upon and utilized when certain thresholds are met, obviously meeting the needs of your community. But in tandem, it feeds into the overarching emergency management plan that is already in place. Data collection, we've been able to discuss the components of the plan. We've been able to discuss the needs of the community with various providers in the community, but also through the town of the fire department as well. You know, firsthand exposure, reports, coordination with Northern Health. They've been a huge piece of information for us feeding into the development of this plan. By way of that, we analyze, we see what makes sense. What are other communities doing in terms of best practices? How can you better collaborate with these groups? But also, what are we looking at in terms of the landscape of climate and weather? What it is today may not be what it is tomorrow. And this has been a pretty wild winter in terms of what we're expecting, from mildness to crazy blizzards for 2 weeks at a time, and then back to +6 temperatures. I was looking at your weather trends last week, and it's cold today, but it was certainly very warm last week. And from my perspective, I just left Lethbridge. That was, I believe, +15 the other day. That came without wind, which is very rare, but it was very appreciative. But it's just crazy to come up here and actually see snow. But it's just the varying temperature swings that we're seeing, not just in northern BC or southern Alberta, but really across the country. Currently, Manitoba and the Dakotas are also seeing various blizzards that are coming through. So it's all about being prepared for those emergent storms that do come through and can drastically change conditions quite quickly and impact others. From there, we were able to develop the plan, figure out where everybody fit, roles, responsibilities, what works, who needs to communicate. And I think that is the heart of this plan, is communicating with the right people at the right time. And first and foremost, that's your residents, letting them know what exactly is going on in terms of the risk, but also informing them of solutions and things that are available in the community that best support them. It's one thing to put your arm outside and say it's cold and make that rational decision for yourself. Unfortunately, some people don't have the means of, one, getting the method of communication to actually be aware of that, but also they may not have the cognitive abilities, the other means of being able to find solutions when cold weather hits. So it's really important that, yes, we can put our arm outside and we can feel that it is cold, but that impacts people differently. And it's all about meeting the needs and finding equitable solutions across the board. Our review has been a comprehensive process, which I believe is culminating today. I give that a half check mark. Really, we've been focused on the operational reality side of things. Today, it will be really important for us to gather the policy and operate and the strategic guidance, what you're hearing from your residents, so that when we do hit the final development of the plan or the final draft, it is something that is vetted, and it's, again, the operational realities, but also aligned with the community needs and your vision as a council. So we're very much looking forward to that discussion today as well. Again, very much in draft form at this point. We continue to work with the fire department, but again, as we start nearing the finish line, it will be a huge piece for council's input to be part of that final plan as well. Next slide. All right. So the cold weather response plan is rooted in emergency management best practice. For the most part, emergency management is 4 spectrums. We have mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. It's emulated in your main emergency management plan. It's also reiterated within this cold weather response plan. And that is a big piece, just because when we're looking at hazard specific plans, it's more than just putting resources and strategies in place. It's also, as we've talked about, communication and what does that look like? How do we actually get facilities and our population ready? Focusing specifically on the preparedness side of things, there are elements built within this plan, like an annual review by September 15th every year, facility readiness checks, whether that be working and liaising with the TWS during normal operating hours or normal operating season of October 1st, By October 15th, it's working with them to make sure that supplies are in place, but also your internal emergency support services. If additional centers do become available, we do know that that is a concern at this point, but if more come available or emergent solutions do arise, facility readiness checks, supply checks, and other things can be put into place so that when cold snaps do hit, and hopefully not before October 15th, your teams are more adequately prepared to respond quickly when safety issues do arise. It also includes training and exercising elements. So having a tabletop discussion, working through the components of the plan to validate it, or actually moving through a full scale or drill type exercise where resources are mobilizing to a scenario is embedded within this plan as well. And again, the main focus on that is annual preparedness, and that one has a benchmark of November 15th annually as well. This includes contact checklists. The worst part of a plan is when you open it up at 2 a.m. on a Sunday and you go to the front page and the person that you're trying to call is no longer in that position. So making sure that that plan is ready to go, because this stuff does happen on long weekends. It happens late hours. It happens anytime you can kind of think about it. Emergencies and disasters are meant to disrupt our lives, and they do so. And it's our ability to actually get in front of things that makes us more empowered to deal with them and it be in a better spot to support our community and our residents going forward. And ultimately, I'd say the regional district at the same time. The next biggest piece for us was figuring out what the activation looked like. So it's one thing to have a plan in place. It's one thing to identify strategies, as we've mentioned, but what does it actually look like? There's a lot of considerations to be given in terms of if you want temperature thresholds, time-based thresholds. We've tried to incorporate both those in. And I will admit a lot of this does focus on Prince George. It is a shared reality. It is a shared hazard with some minor differences. So we have emulated your plan very similarly to theirs, with level 1 being a cold watch. No formal activation of an EOC, and we'll go through it the next page or the next slide. But really focused on that communication side of things, early signs of vulnerable individuals at risk. This is where frostbite, hypothermia, and other cold-related illnesses can quickly onset. This puts you in a better situation to monitor conditions, not only with the weather, but also what's going on in your community. We've had a big benefit with this project and the timing. Environment Climate Change Canada is the one who issues all cold weather alerts, or actually any weather alert across the country. And their new system that they rolled out, I believe just before the end of this or last year, is a new color coding system, which is specifically tied to impact. So if you see a yellow cold alert coming through, it means you're going to have a medium impact on your community, but they detail out what that would mean. In the past, it would be very restrictive to local authorities. It would say -40 for 2 hours or more. And I can share from my experience, and I'm sure everybody in the room can share this as well, is if you're experiencing -40 for 2 hours or more, it's probably been -40 for a while. And your community is already feeling the impacts. You as council are probably fielding calls. Northern Health, ambulance services are probably all being inundated by this point. So anything we put into play once we hit that trigger point from the federal government, we're already behind. And the new color-coded system from Environment Climate Change Canada actually puts local authorities in a better position where, no, we're actually seeing issues in our community. We need to start addressing those. And that's where some of the increasing levels of the plan, when we look at thresholds, actually focus on that. So you can see we've got a couple indicators there related to critical infrastructure. Level 2 being the cold alerts. Again, now we're looking at -15 to -20 for 48 hours or more. So we're looking at a cold snap that is sticking around for a while, but a localized power outage lasting for 4 hours or more. So this drastically impacts your community in more ways. Now it's not just your vulnerable groups. They're obviously going to be impacted, but you might have entire neighborhoods. You might have entire hotels in terms of the visitor side of things that now we're needing to take care of. In these cold snaps, if buildings can't warm or even provide hot water, it's important that emergency support services is included quickly, but your fire department is probably responding to these as well. The focus on these levels and these thresholds is so we can adequately start looking at forecasts and putting those resources in place ahead of time versus being that reactionary piece and playing from behind. The biggest thing is if you're not telling the story, somebody else will. And this plan is very much putting you in the front and center where the local authority will be able to provide this based on where we're currently at with current weather forecasts. Last but not least is the probably bigger end of the deal is our actual cold emergency. This is where it's -20 or more for a very long time. We're looking again at that 48 hours plus. So this could be, you know, a 2-week cold snap that's really impacting your community. Again, we focus on critical infrastructure being included in here, a widespread prolonged power outage, which again, very similar to what we talked about in level 2, drastically impacting the ability for your residents to warm their homes, hotels, take care of visitors. It's important that these plans have triggers that feed into other plans like emergency support services, but also your overarching emergency plan. These are things that your director of emergency management, your emergency preparedness, your emergency program coordinator, and your fire chief would be focused on in advance. And we're really hopeful that this plan just gives them more tools in the toolbox to start pulling things out. Next slide, please. So what does that look like when we're actually talking about different levels and thresholds? And level 1, I mean, realistically, we could be in that today. It's monitoring weather conditions, it's preparing shelters and staff, it's doing engagement, it's doing outreach and finding out what is the community currently going through. Well, again, it's one thing to put your arm outside and find out it's cold, but what is actually occurring? Are we seeing people not being able to warm themselves? Are they trying to get into the encampment? All sorts of different things. At this point, we aren't activating any formal EOC or emergency operations centers, but we're certainly starting to have those conversations in terms of what that looks like strategically should things escalate or get colder. And that's where we would move into level 2, the ability to partially activate your emergency coordination center, your emergency operations center. The biggest thing for this is finding additional support mechanisms by way of the plan that you can activate within the community, but it's also communication. This is the phase where now outreach teams would be getting involved. There might be short-term referrals that you're pushing off to Northern Health and working with them to make sure that adequate supports are made, but also just really connecting with the service providers. What do you have available? How can we work with you to actually get that going and get people into those spaces that you have? Good Acre Place being a good example, just to kind of complement what they have at the temporary winter shelter today. Again, we're always trying to find means in terms of this plan to augment what is already in place. Level 3 is your major cold emergency. Again, we talked about that being -20 or greater for 48 hours. Additional warming centers are almost mandated at this point. They're going to be required based on the impacts that are being felt across the community, whether that be accessing warm areas or if we're actually going through a prolonged power outage of some kind. This is also where transportation needs might come into play. Again, it's one thing to offer solutions of we have 6 available beds at a separate facility outside of the temporary winter shelter, but can people actually get there? Are they going from one end of the town to another? So the plan tries to bring in collaborative partners to find solutions for any challenge that might arise. We've talked a lot about outreach. We've talked about a lot just getting warm in those warming centers for a cup of coffee, but it's also working with your community in terms of buses, school buses, and taxi drivers to try to get those people around the best you can. The best thing is the plan also recognizing that a lot of these things are emergent solutions that your EOC might authorize or come up with throughout the phasing of response. The plan also emphasizes on the cost recovery side of things. So again, by way of working with EMCR, there's the ability to get disaster recovery funding, and transportation would definitely fit the bill for that as well. So again, feeding in the components of the plan tied specific to services like that, whether it be an additional warming center or transportation, very much embedded within a collaborative effort amongst the community, but also assisting your emergency support services in terms of getting cost recovery for that as well. Next slide. We've talked a lot about communications. It's huge. It's why emergency management exists. We need to communicate with the right people at the right time. And the question you can always ask yourself is, who have we missed? And it's important that during an emergency of any kind, whether it be level 1, 2, or 3, that the messaging is clear and concise and makes sense for the community. Our goal is to have that accessible as possible. What we've created in this plan is a number of built templates that can just be populated with dates, locations, phone numbers, and other pertinent information that you might want your residents to know. As we progress to level 2 being the baseline for this approach, we also go ahead and have a 4-hour interval for these communications to be issued. So again, whether it's the same communication, no updates, nothing has changed, we're still consistently updating the public and having a face out there for them to actually see what's going on. But the biggest thing is, again, if we're not telling the story, someone else is. So the plan is intended to try to put you ahead a little bit in terms of communicating with the public and building that trust. I think that is one of the biggest things in terms of as you're offering solutions, you want people to have the confidence in what you've set up for them to actually access that at the same time. We haven't actually built it in with the plan, but just focusing on bullet number 3, the multilingual and plain language context. Plain language inherently is built into the pre-planned templates, but there's also an emphasis on making sure, as we talk about accessibility, are we covering all the languages in our area? Are we covering off all the individuals that might be here, whether they be visitors or residents? And again, working with your communications team, it would be this plan supports making sure that those mechanisms are in place to make sure, again, we're spreading the net far and wide as possible, but also ensuring that people can understand what is being shared at the same time. Biggest one being, again, focused on level 2 is where the partial EOC now comes into play. And that's where we start bringing more partners to the table. So not only do we have the town in the room, but we'll have provincial partners like Northern Health or BC Ambulance Service, but also start including some of those outreach teams. There are going to be a wealth of information in terms of these are other challenges that that we're actually seeing visibly in the community, and we need to find solutions for that, whether that be referrals or some other emergent solution by way of the EOC. Next slide. At the heart of the plan is a baseline for the temporary winter shelter. Now, we do know that seasonally it's going to activate from October 1st to April 30th. This plan doesn't impact that at all. It augments what's already in place. It seeks to create a relationship between the TWS and the town to make sure that it is thriving, but also everybody knows what's going on in terms of communicating to the public what's available, but also challenges that are currently there. So again, we're always building better. How can we build community resilience at the operational level? It is our baseline warming center. And as we work through the different levels, the TWS becomes a core piece in terms of one, the primary solution for people at this point without an actual dedicated homeless shelter site, but also working with other providers in terms of trying to piecemeal approaches in terms of other beds that might be available or other spaces that we could start sending people to at the same time. The TWS becomes a routing point. So we talked about transportation, but also getting updates from there as well. And we have proposed that the town have basically a liaison, whether it be the EPC that's tied with keeping regular weekly updates with a TWS liaison that they can share. And again, creating a metric, and we'll talk about in a couple slides here, but creating a metric of communication, one at the operational level. So the challenges are both being shared. The town might have observations that the TWS doesn't have. Likewise, the TWS may have observations or other incident reports that keeping in mind privacy and all those wonderful legal things, but it's also making sure that those are being reported at the right spot so we can find solutions instead of just continuing to let some of these problems fester. And while we're offering solutions, it may not be the best approach at that point. So we're making sure that all levels are supporting the multi-network approach, whether we're bringing individuals directly into an EOC if activated or doing weekly touch points. Next slide, please. This is where our neighborhood impact protocols come into play. So within the plan, we have embedded key performance indicators. Now, a lot of these are readily available. Again, the liaisons from the operational side of things of the TWS and the town can communicate on what this would look like, focusing on privacy laws and other things like that. But first and foremost, it's litter collected, it's been sharps collected, it's incident reporting that might be there without any specific client details. Again, we might know of an incident that occurred, but we don't know who was involved or any of those particulars. But it's important that that information is being shared. That way, security patrols that are available for the TWS site or additional supports that might be activated can kind of follow suit and ensure alignment there, but also, again, focus on the community safety element. Are there things that are arising that are creating a more hazardous situation at the TWS versus just the cold itself? Now we're dealing with a secondary hazard. The role of the neighborhood impact plan is transparency where we can, making sure that both the TWS and the town can communicate with what's being experienced, but also meeting the needs of everybody. Next slide. Now, the biggest thing is when we open up an EOC, it's one thing to deal with the situation. We put out the wildfire, we've stopped the flood, that's great. We turn off the lights and go home. This one is a lot more complex. When we talk recovery, weather swings may take time to come in place. So within the updated plan, we've created a 72-hour threshold where conditions need to be stabilized for that 72-hour period. We know that conditions are going to be improving slowly but surely. The warm temperatures are coming through, or we've been able to restore services to usual focused on the prolonged power outage side of things. It's important that as much as we activate this plan, it has a very thorough send off as well. This also assists with the warm handoffs for referrals, making sure that, you know, if people are in the system with Northern Health, but they were within the town first, are they actually being connected to those housing services, some of those long-term mental health solutions or otherwise? It's important that, you know, that referral and that warm handoff is really much embedded within this. So we're not simply turning off the lights and waiting for the next cold snap to come through. We've actually tried to get some of these referrals and short-term solutions in place. So when future cold snap hits, hopefully we're not seeing as drastic of an impact across the community. And again, as much as we've talked about the TWS, they continue their seasonal operation inside or outside of an EOC activation. An EOC activation is simply meant to help assist with other supports outside of the TWS to make sure that the community has all their issues being addressed at the same time. So again, the plan doesn't interrupt operations. It doesn't direct them in any way. It simply brings them on as a partner and makes sure that we're communicating across the board. Next slide. The emphasis is on partner coordination. This is something that is not going to be solved by one local authority or one single agency. It's going to be a collective approach. The nice thing is we do have BC Housing. Obviously, we've got the TWS being funded by that side of things. Additionally, we know that EMCR provides funding for if you were to declare an emergency, work through level 2, level 3, working with the province, getting a tasking number. There's mechanisms to get cost recovery in terms of additional supplies that you might bring in or the operation of an additional facility. Working with BC Housing, it's a big piece in terms of the long-term referrals, but also communication chains. Important to have them within your EOC, but as a main partner with the plan, just from a planning perspective, making sure that we're all working off the same sheet of music. Bulkley Valley Harm Reduction Society operates the TWS. That's a 24/7 operation, and we've talked about that with seasonal. Again, the plan is meant to bring them on as a partner more formally, not interrupt any of the services that they're currently providing on site. Next slide. Emergency support services is a big piece. Again, this is a town regional funded or regional ran model for your community. This is where you have reception centers for evacuees or other similar supports that might come by way of an incident. Integrating them within this plan is critical. Again, we have that baseline shelter with the TWS, but as much as the town is going to start looking at different solutions, more players are going to have to come to the table. We've talked about if you have an objective without a resource, it's nothing but a wish. The nice thing is you have an ESS team that is ready to support. And that's part of that October 15th benchmark of making sure facility site readiness. It's working with the ESS team. Mobile tents are available. There's a mobile trailer as well as pre-identified reception center sites. The Christian Reformed Church and others are included. So it's important that, you know, as much as we're talking about that's being considered, that emergency support services is very much intertwined within this. And of course, we talked about transportation providers. These are emergent needs that come around during cold events or any incident really for that matter. But the plan actions the ability to make sure some of these resources are readily available and you can start tracking the needs of the individuals across your community. What we're hopeful for is by way of the after action reporting section of the plan where again, lessons are identified and worked on by way of future updates. More partners coming to the table is critical, but also looking at, you know, if we're moving multiple patients for the same causes or same challenges, it gives you a trend in terms of what to look at for future events and start pre-positioning resources to hopefully alleviate that going forward. So it's all about learning and working together at the same time. Next steps. Our biggest thing here is ultimately it's going to be a tool for the town to use, but it's also a foot in the door in terms of building community resiliency. Talked about that a lot with communication with your partners, but it's also communication with the public. Part of the preparedness element too is public education campaigns, whether it be just, hey, if you're coming to Smithers, this is the type of weather to expect. And you know, whether that's visitors, residents, it's important that that information is shared across a digestible risk assessment approach. Conducting frequent multi-stakeholder exercises. So actually practicing with your partners, opening the plan, reading everybody's roles and responsibilities and working through a scenario together. And scenarios, we don't have to ultimately find all the solutions in one go. If we're just doing an exercise simply to pat ourselves on the back, we're not really getting anything out of it. So if we fail an exercise, or in other ways we find ways to update the plan by way of a tabletop, certainly something that is as encouraged as a preemptive element in terms of pre-planning. Updating the plan, we've talked about that quite a bit. It is embedded within the plan, an annual update by October 15th, and continuing to strengthen your relationships with your stakeholders. And that is who you have today, but also looking at who you could work with in the future. Who has a seat at the table primarily, but who can also provide services and really help out with the needs that are mostly associated with cold weather events, which I think everybody's very well aware of in this area. So next slide. I think that is it. So thank you once again for having me today. I am open for any questions.
Council, any questions? Councillor Patterson?
Staring across the table. I was like, come on. Thank you so much. Glad to see that you're so thorough, the person at the helm for emergency response. That's wonderful. Just a quick question about a mass emergency situation with no power or access to like heat during that level 3 that you described, and thinking about generation and mass lodging. Is that included in the plan?
I might default to the chief for this, but I'll answer it the best I can from our discovery phase by way of the deputy mayor. Yes, in a way, we've talked a lot about the overarching emergency management plan, but that also would include your emergency support services plan. At the heart of your emergency support services plan, this is where it would get taken care of. So again, when you hit mass situations, or mass where we have to actually get group lodging or those pieces in place, that's something that would be taken care of by emergency support services. So how we'd probably see this is your entire emergency management plan being activated, full EOC, the cold weather response plan being activated, as well as the emergency support services plan. And by way of that, you're figuring out which plan does what. Each is going to activate different elements, with the overarching EMP kind of controlling the framework of how you're operating. But again, as we're looking at the cold weather response plan, as things start escalating, it brings in other plans that are already at the table as well. Anything additional, Chief?
Yeah, thank you. Through the deputy mayor, we, just as Luke kind of discussed, we have through our ESS plan already some sites that have said they're available for some of these larger events for potential group lodging sites and stuff like that. Some of the issues that we'll need to just make sure are addressed is that these sites, and I think you kind of were alluding to it, that they actually potentially have the backup power that's required for some of these things, so that those buildings can actually stay heated and function during cold weather events as a warming center for the community. And that's something we'll just have to add into our plans as well for some of these areas that we know have offered to work as the group lodging sites. But again, just confirming that not only do they potentially have generator backup, but if they don't, that they have the ability to hook up into a generator, which is some of the things with EMCR. We could do cost recovery on generators and stuff, but if a building's not set up, especially a large building, to accept backup power, that would be an issue. So that is something we're going to be working through as well, just to confirm that we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Other council? I see the mayor had to leave at 6, so she's no longer on the screen. Just one question, and I think it's just more of a clarification. So level 2 cold alert is when the power outage is lasting longer than 4 hours. That's not tied to the minus 15 to minus 20. It's like if it's 0 to minus 10 and the power goes out at the Meadows or something, that's still a level 2 emergency.
Yeah, I'm glad we went there, because I think that slide really didn't talk to the nature or the spirit of what those thresholds actually mean. And I think I also hit it on where you can't be reliant on those federal thresholds. They are absolutely too extreme and you're already going to be experiencing issues along the way. All those elements that are tied to the thresholds, they don't need to be in tandem. They don't need to be all at the same time. You could simply be experiencing one of those issues. It could be a prolonged power outage as long as it's during cold weather. If this is something that is related to heat, again, there's a wonderful heat response plan that's associated with that, right? So it's all depending on the time, but at the end of the day, they don't work separately, or they do work separately, where you don't need them all. It's not a check, we're ready to activate. It's I have one, I'm ready to activate. So the spirit of the plan is really, we're experiencing community challenges and we need some backup or some tools to start supporting what that actually looks like. So glad we went there. I did mean to hit that on the slide. It was one of the most recent updates that we've got, but we've tried to make that very clear. There's certain elements that are part of the plan where it's, you will have to have all these for this, and it's more or less tied to the EOC and who you're bringing to the table. But when we're actually talking about plan activation, it is as flexible as possible to make sure, again, it could be 3 residents that are raising a concern. But if it's valid, it's going to be addressed by way of the plan. So absolutely.
Okay, and then the other question I had is, I believe the TWS is only funded till the end of March this year. Was it identified through the planning that in the future, there's still possible cold weather events in March as well? Or in
Absolutely.
April.
Yeah, the biggest thing is, again, what we experience or see with weather is changes yearly, but it's also continuing to change at the same time. So as much as we have an emergency support today and for this calendar year, it seeks to continue planning for what that looks like going forward, whether it's using, the resources that we've been able to find through engagement and actually articulate within the plan, or if it's just steering the community into the right direction in terms of these are some of the types of things you need to look for a long-term solution, obviously feeding into future projects.
Thank you. There's no further questions from council. Thank you very much for your time tonight, and thank you for taking the time to go through it so thoroughly. It's much appreciated. Thanks. So next up is item 6, which is the regional airport demand and leakage study presented for our information. Is this time where council should maybe be discussing next steps, or are we going to be doing that at a future meeting?
Yeah, certainly with this one, if council, excuse me, has anything they would like to discuss, there is opportunity right now, especially related to some of the findings that were presented tonight. But as council is aware, we are going to be bringing back proposed future courses of action from a staff level as well. So this will be an ongoing process.
Okay, thanks. Anybody on council have anything to say at this time? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I should have brought this up earlier. I was wondering after the fact if there's a way for us to glean information about through maybe public consultation about why people use other airports. I know they got down to the numbers, we're about 50%, but why are actually people choosing to go to Prince George? Why are they choosing to go to Terrace? I mean, we can kind of decipher in our own minds, or I have an idea of why I use other airports. I'm wondering if, I don't know if we could do that on our own, or the consultant could look into those numbers as well. I think it would probably paint a clearer picture for us as to why people are choosing to use those other airports.
Here, Mr. Dewar. Got a thumbs up, so we're
Yeah, I'm just going to take some notes on this. And so for today, I think the intention would be to just generally discuss, and we'll take it back at the staff level and follow up.
Anybody else? Okay. And then we also have 7-1 from the report from our last meeting for our information as well. And I think at this time, we're going to recess until we're ready. I have to move that first. Oh, okay. I'll move that pursuant to section 90 and 92 of the community charter, this regular meeting of council be closed to the public to permit discussions concerning one item falling under section 90.1C, labor relations or other employee relations. And then we'll